U.S. President Donald Trump stuck by his stance that Canada should become the 51st state in his first meeting with Prime Minister Mark Carney.
Alberta Premier Danielle Smith shut down attempts by Ontario Premier Doug Ford to weigh in on Alberta's sovereignty movement.
One Vancouver city councillor has proposed banning the sale of gun-shaped lighters, citing public safety concerns. Hello Canada, it's Wednesday, May 7th, and this is the True North Daily Brief. I'm Cosmin, Dzsurdzsa.
And I'm Noah Jarvis.
We've got you covered with all the news you need to know. Let's discuss the top stories of the day and the True North exclusives you won't hear anywhere else. Prime Minister Mark Carney initially received a chummy welcome from U.S. President Donald Trump during their first White House meeting. In a media availability in the Oval Office on Tuesday, Trump and Carney traded personal compliments and political praise with one another and committed to working together to improve trade relations. Trump congratulated Carney on his election victory and the Liberal Party's political comeback, crediting himself for helping the Liberals. Things quickly unraveled for Carney, though, during the Q&A when Trump resumed his rhetoric about Canada becoming the 51st state. Trump said, quote, "It would be a massive tax cut for Canadian citizens. I'm a real estate developer at heart, and when you get rid of that artificially drawn line, somebody drew that artificially drawn line many years ago with a ruler, just like a straight line right across the top of the country. When you look at the beautiful formation, that's the way it was meant to be." Carney responded in kind, saying that some places, like the White House, Buckingham Palace, and Canada, will never be for sale. Trump quickly replied, saying, quote, "Never say never."
As you know from real estate, there are some places that are never for sale.
That's true.
We're sitting in one right now, Buckingham Palace that you visited as well.
That's true.
And having met with the owners of Canada over the course of the campaign last several months, it's not for sale, won't be for sale ever. But the opportunity is in the partnership and what we can build together. And we have done that in the past. And part of that, as the president just said, is with respect to our own security. And my government is committed for a step change in our investment in Canadian security and our partnership. And I'll say this as well, that the president has revitalized international security, revitalized NATO, and us playing our full weight in NATO, and that will be part of it.
And they have, I must say, Canada is stepping up the military participation because Mark knew, they were low and now they're stepping it up. And that's a very important thing. But never say never. Never say never.
The overall meeting was positive as Carney and Trump seemed friendly and far more affable than Trump's tense relationship with Trudeau. Trump said about Carney, "I think I was probably the greatest thing that happened to him. His party was losing by a lot and he ended up winning, so I really want to congratulate him with probably one of the greatest comebacks in the history of politics, maybe even greater than mine." For Canada, Prime Minister Mark Carney meeting the U.S. president for the first time, and they'll have to work together for several years. But I don't know if you saw the clip before the meeting. I think this was yesterday when Trump was asked about it, and he sort of shrugged his shoulders and almost said, "What meeting?" as if it wasn't as important to the U.S. president. But what other topics were raised during this meeting that Canadians may be concerned about? Was anything achieved regarding the ongoing trade war and the tariffs leveled against Canada?
So on the first question, Mark Carney said that he would be working to ensure that he's going to rebuild the Canadian military to help secure the continental defense. And that is one of Donald Trump's main priorities for Canada. One of his main grievances is that the United States is, quote unquote, subsidizing Canada while also having to secure Canada and protect Canada if they were to be invaded by any other foreign threats. And he believes that this is not a reciprocal relationship, that the United States is pulling far more of the weight in securing North America's defense, and that Canada is not doing enough. So Mark Carney reiterated the point that he would be working toward building up Canada's military, and on the campaign trail, he committed to reaching that NATO target of spending 2% of GDP on defense. And on tariffs, President Trump, he said openly, outright, that he would not be dropping any of the tariffs on Canada, which was kind of the main point of the trip, that Mark Carney go down there to basically pitch the case for why the United States should not be imposing tariffs on Canada. And Mark Carney's big election pitch during the past couple months was that he would be able to work with Donald Trump to fight for Canada and to get the Americans to remove their tariffs on Canadian goods. So Trump just stating outright in the initial meeting before they had closed doors meetings that tariffs were not on the table, was sort of deflated some of Carney's hopes that he would be able to get the president to back down at least on some of the tariffs today. But Mark Carney held a media availability at the Canadian Embassy in Washington just not too long after he held his closed doors meetings with Trump, and he said that while he was not able to get the Americans to budge on tariffs today, that it is an ongoing process, that they will be working with the Americans over the next few weeks, the next few months, in order to negotiate a deal that would see the United States dropping some or all of the recently imposed tariffs in favor of reworking some of the details of the USMCA. And on the USMCA, when Trump was asked whether or not he would scrap the USMCA, Donald Trump praised the deal that he negotiated in his first term. He slammed NAFTA as a deal that should never have been signed, but he did reaffirm his commitment to the USMCA and said that he would like to see that deal come back. And Carney responded by saying that yes, he would be reaffirming the USMCA, but that the deal needs some slight tweaks in order to achieve some of the goals that Canada has in these negotiations in the next few months. So it remains to be seen whether or not the Prime Minister will have any success in negotiating with Donald Trump and getting him to remove some of the tariffs that he has recently imposed. But as of right now, the president is not budging. Alberta Premier Danielle Smith told Ontario Premier Doug Ford to mind his own business when it comes to whether Albertans pursue an independence referendum. Smith held a press conference on Tuesday, a day after she announced plans to send a negotiating team to Ottawa and create the Alberta Next Task Force to assert Alberta's sovereignty. Smith said, quote, "I don't tell him how he should run his province, and I would hope that he doesn't tell me how I should run mine. But we have a very respectful relationship, and I hope that continues." Despite telling Ford to butt out, Smith said the two premiers have a, quote, "great friendship, although they don't agree on everything." Smith said, quote, "In fact, I think we supported different people in the last federal election." The premier was responding to comments Ford made earlier in the day targeted at the independence movement. Ford said on Tuesday, quote, "This is a time to unite the country, not people saying, 'Oh, I'm leaving the country.'" Smith also commented on Alberta's growing separatist movement. She said she would respect any citizen-led referenda, including those pushing for separation. However, Smith explained on Tuesday that she wants to see the number of Albertans supporting the separation decrease, not grow. As of right now, Smith said she expects that slightly more than 30% of Albertans would support a separation referendum. Smith fielded media questions after addressing the province yesterday. On Monday, she issued a list of demands to Ottawa in her speech and pledged an Alberta separation referendum in 2026 if the legal threshold is met. While it was initially expected that the referendums could take place at the province's next set of municipal elections in October 2025, Smith said this timeline was unlikely to work out given the 120-day signature collection period. So, Cosmin, a lot of buzz around the Alberta independence movement ever since Mark Carney's Liberals were re-elected. So, how does Smith plan on approaching the issue of separation? What were some of the elements she's hoping will address Alberta's sovereignty and relationship with Ottawa?
Yeah, Noah. So I think Smith is being pretty cautious. Obviously, her main message is that the will of Alberta citizens and Alberta's sovereignty needs to be respected. But yesterday, we saw her address to Albertans where she laid out essentially a two-pronged plan to address the issue of Ottawa disrespecting Ottawa's independence as well as its jurisdiction as a province. So one of the major things she's proposed is sending a special negotiation team on behalf of Alberta to meet with Ottawa officials, officials from the Liberal minority government, to fight for Alberta's rights and push for what she called a formal Alberta Accord. And that would be a binding agreement, not just, words on paper that both parties sign, but something that Alberta can take away and say that the Ottawa government has legally committed to some of these demands. Now, whether she's actually going to get all of her demands met, that's obviously yet to be seen. And I'm sure Ottawa's going to have their own demands when they go into any future negotiations if that happens. But she's asked for a couple things. So guaranteed port access for Alberta's oil and gas, repeal of anti-energy federal laws like Bill C-69, oil tanker ban. There was also the electricity regulations, etc. She wants no new export taxes on Alberta resources without approval from her government, and fair federal transfers to other provinces. So these are some of the main concerns that she's outlined in her upcoming negotiations. Then there was also the announcement of the Alberta Next panel, which she would chair, but it would essentially be comprised of the leading experts or minds in Alberta from, judicial sphere, from academia, from all sorts of, business leaders, etc. And they will host town halls with Albertans across the province to collect ideas for potential provincial referendums, including on separation. So she hasn't left the idea of a separation referendum or an Alberta independence referendum off the table, but it would have to meet that 177,000 signature threshold. And just remember, there was a recall referendum or petition with Calgary Mayor Jyoti Gondek, and that failed to get the necessary amount of signatures just for the city. There is quite a rigorous verification process, because it's one thing to go there and say, I have 177,000 signatures, but all of those signatures, just like votes, need to be identified to make sure that it's actually, first of all, an Albertan signing it, and secondly, that it's a real person, and all of those other concerns you might have when you're conducting a referendum. A motion before the Vancouver City Council wants to ban the sale of gun-shaped lighters and empower police to seize such items proactively in British Columbia. The motion, introduced by councillor Mike Cosmin, highlights an estimated 50 to 75 retailers, particularly in the downtown east side and Vancouver's downtown core, that currently sell these novelty lighters. The motion calls on Vancouver City Council to request that Vancouver Mayor Ken Sim call on the provincial government to, quote, prohibit the sale, distribution, and possession of gun-shaped lighters across British Columbia. Additionally, Cosmin called on empowering, quote, law enforcement to seize gun-shaped lighters proactively. True North contacted Councillor Cosmin for comment and to ask whether such proposed powers may infringe on the property rights of British Columbians, but has yet to receive a reply. According to the motion, these items have led to a surge in emergency calls, with 46% of incidents occurring in the downtown east side and 39% in the downtown area. In 32 documented cases, the responses required dispatching 10 or more officers, with each incident averaging 2.5 hours to resolve. Canadian Coalition for Firearm Rights Executive Director Rod Giltaca said the motion was wrong-headed and Vancouver has more pertinent things to worry about. Giltaca told True North, quote, I was born in Vancouver. I've been here virtually my whole life. Over the last 15 years, Vancouver went from one of the greatest cities in North America to a geographically beautiful yet disconnected dystopia. I would wonder if Vancouver city councillors have considered how the prohibition on actual guns has panned out for public safety before focusing in on stylized lighters as the city's problem. There are no current federal, provincial, or municipal laws prohibiting the sale or possession of these lighters unless they are used in the commission of a crime. Cosmin argues in his motion this legal gap leaves law enforcement with limited options to proactively address the issue. I mean, Noah, on my own part, I fail to see how this addresses any root causes of crime, whether it's a gun-shaped lighter, whether it's a BB gun, or any other gun imitation. Somebody, if they have the intent to commit a crime, a violent crime, property crime, etc., they're going to use whatever is at their disposal. It could be a knife, it could be a hammer, it could be a machete. I don't think the item addresses that criminal intent or actually causes any change of people or actually convinces anybody who has that intent to not commit a crime otherwise by banning gun-shaped lighters, for example. So, Noah, are there any concerning crime statistics coming out of Vancouver recently? How bad has violent and gun crime in particular become over here?
Crime has gotten out of control in Vancouver, like in many cities in Canada, and people can place the blame in multiple different directions. But at the end of the day, I don't think anyone would agree that, yeah, banning gun-shaped lighters is what's really going to lead to a decrease in crime. For example, Vancouver is one of the capital cities in Canada of stranger crimes. The Vancouver Police Department reported that about 1 to 2 stranger assaults happen on a daily basis in Vancouver, not on a weekly or a monthly basis, on a daily basis. This means that people who are just walking down the streets of Vancouver, going to their job or walking home or going to the grocery store, are just viciously assaulted by people out of the blue and sometimes even killed. There was a recent incident of a man in Vancouver's Chinatown, a 92-year-old man who was killed by a stranger. Homicide investigators say that several people partook in this attack, and they have not even laid down charges yet for this assault that happened on March 18th. There was another incident where a woman was just walking down the street. A woman who was visiting from Toronto was just walking down along the seawall, and she was attacked by a man 3 times. She tried running away. She was attacked again, and she ran once again, and finally she was managed to catch the attention of a plainclothes police officer, thank God, but she suffered a broken nose and multiple cuts and bruises. Imagine that is the reputation, that is the experience that someone visiting Vancouver from another part of Canada gets, in their first, second, third time visiting Vancouver. It's not exactly the type of reputation that Vancouver wants to build, and really the reputation that they're building is a city that allows violent crime, that allows drug abuse, actually facilitates drug abuse for many addicts, and instead is focused on banning gun lighters. For the people of Vancouver who are interested in getting a gun lighter, I would recommend them to go out and get them, because the city is probably going to go out and ban these items, and they're pretty harmless. It's just a lighter at the end of the day. If you want to crack down on real guns, maybe you should crack down on the weapons that are flowing across the American border, that are ending up in the hands of criminals who are then using those guns to commit crimes. It is not, going after gun lighters that is going to solve this problem. It's not going after BB guns, or hell, it's not going after legal gun owners, people who purchased guns legally and have a guns license. Going after those people is not going to solve the problem of crime in Vancouver. It is locking up the people who are perpetrating the crimes and to disincentivize these sorts of crimes from ever happening. And I think the Vancouver City Council really is sending the wrong message through this motion.
That's it for today, folks. Thanks for tuning in. You can stay on top of new episodes every weekday by subscribing to the Daily Brief on iTunes and Spotify. Also, while you're at it, make sure to hit us with a 5-star rating and please leave a review.